ChoroQ on the PS2. A game that, if it weren't for a very quick trip to Wikipedia 30 seconds ago before I started this recording, I would have never known that this game was actually a game based off a series of popular Japanese wind-up toy cars. So, the more you know, insert a star here. I would say that this game is sort of like if you took the movie Cars and made a game about it. Except that the movie it was based off of wasn't abhorrent, and that the game based off of it was actually pretty good too. This game has been called a CarPG, a word I sincerely hope I never have to use again in my life, but it's a racing game with a story and is heavily based on modifying and upgrading your character, which just happens to be a car. And there's also a lot of racing in there too, so I choose to just refer to it as a driving game. The story follows your character, a car, obviously, and it follows him trying to reach his dream of racing in the Grand Prix and becoming the fastest car, I guess. Okay, it's a story with a driving game. It's not great, but at least they put some effort into it, and I like that every one of the cars has its own personality to fit with its general theme. So the more expensive, faster looking, exotic cars are kind of like the super cool badasses, and the rest of the economy class are basically just the plebeian people who drive around town and you make fun of a lot. I think the first stumbling block this game hits is kind of with the gameplay. See, the game is based heavily on modifying and customizing your car. You can change its colors, you can change basically every single bit of its exterior, and aside from the basic body of the car, all of it affects your stats. However, I think that the developers of this game sort of saw a need to teach you that you need to constantly improve your character or else you're just gonna start sucking. Unfortunately, this means that when you start, you're just flat out terrible. Like, seriously, you start out awful. Even in the most beginner races, I've restarted and tried a couple times, but with the basic build you start with, I don't think I've ever come in higher than 4th. However, you take the meager amount of winnings that your less than stellar performance has given you, you take it to a custom shop, and you buy a better motor, and suddenly you start winning races. And I think that's one of the biggest things about this game is simply upgrading your car so that you can handle whatever challenges approach you. But there's more to it than simply getting a better engine and suddenly you move faster. The upgrades get a little bit wackier too. With water levels, your car can not drive terribly well, but you can purchase a boat motor and suddenly you're the master of your environment. There's skis for ice levels, tires for off-road and on-road, and I think in the end it comes down to sort of knowing your environment ahead of time. Because I never found a single build that really handled every course perfectly well. So you constantly have to be out there getting new equipment and experimenting, which I felt was fun, except that it also felt like it took too long to get new equipment, and that's a little annoying. My second biggest gripe with ChoroQ is the fact that no matter how you upgrade your turning, I never felt that your car turned terribly well. I found a total of 3 different steering wheels which change your turning ability, and the first one makes you feel like some sort of giant farting walrus, because you can't turn to save your life. The second one makes you feel like you're a slightly less giant walrus. But the biggest difference is in the third one, which makes your car basically uncontrollable, because the turning just feels unnaturally tight. Like your car won't grip the road and it'll just sort of turn sideways into a wall, and that's no good. It also gets compounded by the fact that in later races, with longer laps, you have to worry about the tire condition of your car. So by making harsher turns like this wheel would give you, you're wearing down your car a lot, and then you have to go pit, and it's awful. No thanks. But with the singular exception of turning, I found that racing in general was very intuitive and very fun. Another problem I have with the racing is some of the track layouts are a bit weird. For example, sometimes you'll just run into massive potholes in the road, and they're kinda awkward to deal with, or steps. And I don't mean in the sense that it's a ramp that has a stair texture, I mean ones that you'll actually have to bump and jump up. and that just really felt awkward and slowing me down, and I didn't enjoy that. This game certainly doesn't convey speed terribly well. While your car will be going faster and it will be lapping other cars, or they'll be lapping you if they've got better stuff than you never feel like you're going terribly fast. And I think part of it's just the fact that there's no blur, but the game itself just feels like you were a little toy car driving around, and I think I may have just blown my mind because I think that might have actually been intentional. Good show. I mean, still doesn't feel fast, but good show. Outside of the racing and the hundreds of parts you can get to modify and customize your car, there's also side quests which take part in the main city. You'll get an email which will ask you for some help. You can go take part in a mini game, make some extra money, that's fun. You can also drive around and talk to people and generally just get information on the world itself. And it does feel like each car has its own personality, which is nice. So I think in the end, gameplay for this game was pretty good. There's a decent enough variation in equipment that'll make you want to unlock one, test it out, then try and unlock another and see what that does. I did enjoy the fact that the game sort of progressively evolves as you move on. Eventually you get a team, and eventually you do get into the Grand Prix, and it does feel a little bit different than these smaller singular races. I'm a big fan of the visual design of this game. It's bright, it's colorful, all the tracks have their own unique personality, all the cars have their own unique personality. And I like that while they don't use official car brands, you can tell that X car just happens to be a Nissan Skyline, or X car happens to be a Ferrari Testarossa. You can definitely pick out your favorites when you see them. And I like the fact that this game gives personality to generic vehicles, which trying to make inanimate objects into people and make them appear more than just inanimate objects, that's pretty tricky, so I gotta give them props for that. The sound design is pretty good. Most of the sound effects are pretty average. I think the tire squealing sound effect when you try and drift is one of the most obnoxious things ever because it's a lot louder than all the other sound effects. But aside from that, the sound effects are okay. The music though, the music's great. And all the music in this game feels like it has a really high level of polish and quality to it. I think in the end, ChoroQ is a pretty decent driving game. Yeah, it's basic lap racing, and I'm not a big fan of that, but there's also open world bits, and there's some fun minigame stuff to break up the monotony too. There's well over 100 different parts and bodies, some of which you have to win, others you can buy. And the nice thing is, once you visit a store to buy something, you unlock the ability to simply buy it from your garage, which saves a lot of time. I really appreciated that. And presentation-wise, this game is just really well polished. I'm really impressed with ChoroQ, and if you like racing games on the PS2, I suggest looking into this one. It didn't cost me all that much. I bought it for pocket change. And with aforementioned trip to Wikipedia, I found there's apparently about 24 of these games out there, and while most of them did stay in Japan, at least prior to this game, there's still quite a decent number out there, and I'm gonna be completely honest here, this one impressed me enough that I'm gonna go and try and grab the others, because I want to see where this game came from, and I want to see where it's going, because it was fun, and it certainly was a different look at driving.